Monsieur le Président du Sénat, merci, Monsieur le Président de la Chambre des communes, Mesdames et Messieurs les parlementaires, distingués invités, Mesdames et Messieurs. It is my honor to welcome to Canada's Parliament His Highness the Aga Khan. I'm also pleased to recognize his family members and Ismaili leaders who have come from across the country and around the world to hear His Highness address the Canadian people. Please, colleagues, welcome them all. As we all know, Canada is home to a well-established and fast-growing Ismaili community. His Highness has therefore become an increasingly frequent visitor and always a welcome one. En fait, Votre Altesse, vous n'êtes plus simplement un visiteur. Vous êtes maintenant citoyen canadien à titre honorifique. I remember well, Your Highness, the day you accepted honorary Canadian citizenship, something agreed to by all parties of this House. It was during the foundation ceremony of Toronto's Ismaili Centre, Aga Khan Museum and Park. I'm told construction there has gone well and that the centre will soon portray Islamic contributions to the enlightened pursuit of knowledge. Et cette histoire cataloguée avec soin sera accessible à tous. In any case, Your Highness, know this: when you are in Canada, you are home. Dans quelques instants, Son Altesse nous fera part de quelques réflexions. Our decision to extend Canadian citizenship to His Highness recognizes the reality of values shared and values acted upon. His Highness's lifelong advocacy for humanitarianism, pluralism, and tolerance has gone far beyond words. Par exemple, le Centre mondial du pluralisme, ici à Ottawa, a été établi en partenariat avec notre gouvernement au tout début de notre mandat. His Highness's Global Centre for Pluralism here in Ottawa advances good governance and engages with societies on the precipice of crisis. Similarly, through the Aga Khan Development Network, His Highness has been tireless in humanitarian and development initiatives in Africa, in Asia, including in Afghanistan, where the network continues to be a brave partner in Canada's efforts to secure and improve the lives of Afghan citizens. Over the years, then, we have built together a solid record of genuine assistance to some of the world's neediest people. Today, that work goes on. In particular, our government and the network cooperate in the development priority that Canada assumed at the Muskoka G8, the promotion of maternal, newborn, and child health. La mort vaine, je dirais scandaleuse, de tant de femmes, de nourrissons et d'enfants dans des pays en développement est une tragédie sans nom à notre époque où le savoir médical est si étendu. In his work, Your Highness, we are delighted to have your personal support and the capable assistance of the Aga Khan Foundation of Canada and the Aga Khan Development Network. Les Canadiens et les Canadiennes ont le plus grand respect pour leur travail et votre leadership nous inspire l'espoir d'un monde meilleur. Mr. Speaker, colleagues, Canadians are strongest when we have the support of those who share our values. Aussi révérées soient-elles en Occident, les valeurs profondément ancrées ne sont pas l'apanage d'une seule culture. Those who love freedom and democracy, those who desire peace, those who will uphold the basic rights of every man and woman, and those who, such as His Highness, share our belief that pluralism, diversity within a united country, is the basis of all of these things. These are our friends. Your Highness, we have met on several occasions, and like our country as a whole, I value your counsel and your friendship. Il est devenu clair qu'il existe ce que j'ai qualifié à une autre occasion d'exquise symétrie entre vos valeurs et les valeurs canadiennes. You once said, and I quote, "We cannot make the world safe for democracy without first making the world safe for diversity." This is a most Canadian way of seeing things. Effectivement, c'est dans cet esprit. Et on était convaincus que la liberté de religion et de conscience sont les fondements de nos libertés, que l'an dernier, notre gouvernement établit le Bureau de la liberté de religion. Your Highness, the depth of our relationship suggests more frequent and deliberate dialogue between the Imamat and the Government of Canada would be beneficial. J'ai donc le plaisir d'annoncer qu'à la conclusion de ce processus, l'Imamat et le gouvernement du Canada signeront un protocole d'entente dans le prolongement de notre vaste relation historique. I am therefore pleased to announce that after the conclusion of these proceedings, the Imamat and the Government of Canada will sign a protocol of understanding that builds upon our broad historic relationship. Let me just conclude, Your Highness, by returning to the subject of Canada's Ismaili community, which began its life here more than 40 years ago as penniless refugees from Uganda. Yet from that moment on, Canada's Ismailis have become one of Canada's most successful immigration stories. Votre Altesse, la prospérité de vos fidèles, leur intégration harmonieuse à la société canadienne, et le respect qu'ils ont inspiré pourrait être considéré comme un hommage à la manière d'être pluraliste au Canada. Et c'est le cas dans une mesure considérable. The Ismaili combination of self-reliance and willingness to give for the betterment of others and of Canada itself is a reflection of your teachings. And Your Highness, it was a good day for all of us, when you told your followers to, quote, make Canada your home. You must be very proud of them. Certainly, we all are. Maintenant, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les parlementaires, veuillez vous joindre à moi pour accueillir un grand ami et partenaire du Canada, Son Altesse, l'Aga Khan.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Prime Minister, Speaker Kinsella, Speaker Scheer, honourable members of the Senate and House of Commons, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, honourable members of the diplomatic community, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The Prime Minister's generous introduction has been very kind. I am grateful for this invitation, for our association, and for so thoughtfully enabling leading representatives of our community and institutions around the world to join us on this occasion. Thank you, Prime Minister. I'm thankful that these leaders of the Ismaili community will have this opportunity to see for themselves why Canada is a leader in the community of nations. I must also thank you, Prime Minister, for inviting me to become an honorary citizen. May I congratulate you on the gold medals of your remarkable hockey teams in Sochi. As an ex-player myself, I was hoping you would require your honorary citizens to join your team. I am convinced that the Dalai Lama and I would have been a formidable defense. Merci encore, Monsieur le Premier ministre, pour votre invitation. Je ressens cet instant comme un honneur sans précédent. C'est à la fois un sentiment intime et une perception objective, puisque l'on m'a rapporté que c'est la première fois depuis 75 ans qu'un chef spirituel s'adresse au Sénat et à la Chambre des communes réunies dans le cadre d'une visite officielle. C'est donc avec humilité et conscient d'une éminente responsabilité que je m'adresse à vous, représentants élus du Parlement fédéral canadien, en présence des plus hautes autorités du gouvernement fédéral. J'ai le grand privilège de représenter ici l'Imamat Ismaili, cette institution qui, au-delà des frontières, et depuis plus de 1400 ans, se définit et est reconnue par un nombre croissant d'États comme la succession des imams chiites Imami Ismaili. 49e imam de cette longue histoire, je porte depuis plus de 50 ans deux responsabilités inséparables. Veiller au devenir spirituel des Ismailis, ainsi que, concomitamment, à l'amélioration de leur qualité de vie et de celle des populations au sein desquelles ils vivent. Même s'il fut une époque où les imams ismailis étaient aussi califes, c'est-à-dire chefs d'État, par exemple en Égypte à l'époque fatimide. Ma fonction est aujourd'hui apolitique, tout Ismaili étant avant tout un citoyen ou une citoyenne de son pays de naissance ou d'adoption. Le champ d'action de l'imamat ismaili est pourtant considérablement plus important qu'à cette époque lointaine, puisqu'il déploie aujourd'hui ses activités dans de nombreuses régions du monde. C'est dans ce cadre que j'évoquerai successivement devant vous quelques réflexions qui me paraissent dignes de vous être présentées. I propose today to give you some background about myself and my role, and then to reflect about what we call the Ummah, the entirety of Muslim communities around the world. I will comment as a faith leader on the crisis of governance in so much of the world today, before concluding with some thoughts about the values that can assist countries of crisis to develop into countries of opportunity, and how Canada can help shape that process. First, then, a few personal words. I was born into a Muslim family, linked by heredity to the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him and his family. My education blended Islamic and Western traditions, and I was studying at Harvard some 50 years ago. Yes, 50 years ago. Actually, 56 years ago. When I became the hereditary imam of the Shia Imami Muslims. The Ismaili Imamat is a supranational entity, representing the succession of imams since the time of the Prophet. But let me clarify something more about the history of that role in both the Sunni and the Shia interpretations of the Muslim faith. The Sunni position is that the Prophet nominated no successor, and that spiritual moral authority belongs to those who are learned in matters of religious law. As a result, there are many Sunni imams in a given time and in a given place. But others believed that the Prophet had designated his cousin and son-in-law, Ali, as his successor. From that early division, a host of further distinctions grew up. But the question of rightful leadership remains central. In time, the Shia were also subdivided over these questions, so that today the Ismailis are the only Shia community who throughout history have been led by a living hereditary imam in direct descent from the Prophet. The role of the Ismaili imam is a spiritual one. His authority is that of religious interpretation. It is not a political role. I do not govern any land. At the same time, Islam believes fundamentally that the spiritual and material worlds are inextricably connected. Faith does not remove Muslims or their imams from daily practical matters in family life, in business, in community affairs. Faith, rather, is a force that should deepen our concern for our worldly habitat, for embracing its challenges, and for improving the quality of human life. The Muslim belief in this fusion of faith and world is why much of my attention has been committed to the work of the Arkhan Development Network. In 1957, when I succeeded my grandfather as Imam, the Ismaili community lived for the most part in the colonies, ex-colonies of France, Belgium, and the British Empire, or behind the Iron Curtain. This is a highly diverse community in terms of ethnicity, language, culture, and geography. They continue to live mostly in the developing world, though increasing numbers now live in Europe and North America. Before 1957, individual Ismaili communities had their own social and economic institutions where that was allowed. There was no intent for them to grow to national prominence, and even less a vision to coordinate their activities across frontiers. Today, however, that situation has changed, and the Arkhan Development Network has a strong presence in several dozen countries where appropriate regional coordination also is useful. The AKDN, as we call it, is composed of a variety of private, non-governmental, non-denominational agencies, implementing many of the Imamat's responsibilities. We are active in the fields of economic development, job creation, education, healthcare, as well as important cultural initiatives. Most of our AKDN activities have been born from the grassroots of developing countries, reflecting their aspirations and their fragilities. Through the years, of course, this landscape has changed fundamentally, with the creation of new states like Bangladesh, the horrors of ethnic cleansing in Uganda, the collapse of the Soviet Empire, and the emergence of new countries with large Ismaili populations, such as Tajikistan. More recently, of course, we have faced the conflicts in Afghanistan and in Syria. But through all of these experiences, the Ismaili peoples have demonstrated an impressive capacity to persevere and to progress. Our work has always been people-driven. It grows out of the age-old Islamic ethic, committed to goals with universal relevance: the elimination of poverty, access to education, and social peace in a pluralist environment. The AKDN's fundamental objective is to improve the quality of human life. Amongst the great common denominators of the human race is a shared aspiration, a common hope for a better quality of life. I was struck a few years ago to read about a UNDP survey of 18 South American states, where the majority of the people were less interested in their forms of government than in the quality of their lives. Even autocratic governments that improved their quality of life would be more acceptable for most of those polled than ineffective democratic governments. I cite that study, of course, with due respect to governmental institutions that have had a more successful story including certain very distinguished parliaments. But the sad fact behind so much instability in our world today is that governments are seen to be inadequate to these challenges. A much happier fact is that in the global effort to change this picture, Canada is an exemplary leader. Let me now describe a few examples of a quarter of a century of close collaboration between AKDN and Canada. One of our earliest collaborations was to establish the first private nursing school in Pakistan, in cooperation with McMaster and the SIDA of that time. It was the first component of the Arkhan University, the first private university in that country. The nursing school's impact has been enormous. Many of those who now head other nursing programs in hospitals in the whole of the region, not just Pakistan, are graduates of our school. Canada was also one of the first donors to the Arkhan Rural Support Program in northern Pakistan, tripling incomes in this remote, marginalized area. The approaches developed there have shaped our further collaborations in Tajikistan, in Afghanistan, in Kenya, and in Mozambique. Canada has also helped establish the Arkhan University's Institute for Educational Development in Karachi and in East Africa, along with other educational initiatives in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Mozambique, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Pakistan, including pioneering work in the field of early childhood development. I could speak about our close ties with Canadian universities also, such as McMaster, McGill, the University of Toronto, and the University of Alberta, enhancing our own institutions of tertiary education, the Arkhan University and the University of Central Asia. The latter institution has resulted from the Imamat's unique tripartite treaty with the governments of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and Tajikistan. It serves some 22 million people who live in Central Asia, in hillside and high mountain environments, areas of acute seismic and economic vulnerability. And I could list many more examples in cultural development and in scientific research. And we are especially proud of the Global Center for Pluralism here in Ottawa, a joint project of the Imamat and the Canadian government. In just 3 years, Canada will mark its 150th anniversary, and the whole world will be ready to celebrate with you. Sharing Canada's robust pluralistic history is a core mission of our Global Center, and 2017 will be a major opportunity for doing so, operating from its headquarters in the former War Museum on Sussex Drive. Perhaps 2017 and the celebrations can be a catalyst with our neighbors to improve the entire riverfront area around that building. Our partnership in Canada has been immensely strengthened, of course, by the presence for more than 4 decades of a significant Ismaili community. Like most historical global communities, the Ismaili peoples have a variegated history, but surely our experience in Canada has been a particularly positive chapter. I happily recall the establishment of the delegation of the Ismaili Imamat here in 2008, and the Prime Minister's description that day of our collaborative efforts to make Canada, and I quote, the headquarters of the global effort to foster peace, prosperity, and equality through pluralism. We're deeply pleased. we are deeply pleased that we can sign today a new protocol with your government, further strengthening our ongoing platform for cooperation. As we look to the next 25 years of the AKDN, we believe that our permanent presence in the developing world will make us a dependable partner, especially in meeting the difficult challenges of predictability. Against this background, let me move on to the broad international sphere, including the role of relations between the countries and cultures of Islam, what we call the Ummah, and non-Islamic societies. It is central to the shape of global affairs in our time. I would begin by emphasizing a central point about the Ummah, often unseen elsewhere, the fundamental fact of its immense diversity. Muslim demography has expanded dramatically in recent years, and Muslims today have highly differing views on many questions. Essential among them is that they do not share some common, overarching impression of the West. It has become commonplace for some to talk about an inevitable clash of the industrial West and Islamic civilizations. But Muslims don't see things in this way. Those whose words and deeds feed into that point of view are a small and extreme minority. For most of us, it is simply not true. We find singularly little in our theological interpretations that would clash with other Abrahamic faiths, with Christianity and Judaism. Indeed, there is much that is in profound harmony. When the clashes of modern times have come, they have most often grown out of particular political circumstances, the twists and turns of power relationships and economic ambitions, rather than deep theological divides. Yet sadly, what is highly abnormal in the Islamic world gets mistaken for what is normal. Of course, media perceptions of our world in recent years have often been conveyed through a lens of war. But that is all the more reason to shape global conversation in a more informed direction. I am personally aware of the efforts the Prime Minister has made to achieve this. Thank you, Prime Minister. The complexity of the Ummah has a long history. Some of the most glorious chapters in Islamic history were purposefully built on the principles of inclusiveness. It was a matter of state policy to pursue excellence through pluralism. This was true from the time of the Abbasids in Baghdad and the Fatimids in Cairo over 1,000 years ago. It was true in Afghanistan and Timbuktu in Mali, and later with the Safavids in Iran, the Mughals in India, the Uzbeks in Bukhara, the Ottomans in Turkey. From the 6th to the 18th century, Al-Andalus thrived on the Iberian Peninsula under Muslim aegis, but also deeply welcoming to Christian and Jewish peoples. Today, these Islamic traditions have been obscured in many places, from Muslims and non-Muslims alike. The work of the Arkhan Trust for Culture, including the Arkhan Award for Architecture and our Historic Cities program, is to revive the memory of this inclusive inheritance. Another immediate initiative is the Arkhan Museum, which will open this year in Toronto. an important testimonial in a Canadian setting to the immense diversity of Islamic cultures. Perhaps the most important area of incomprehension outside the Ummah is the conflict between the Sunni and Shia interpretations of Islam and the consequences for the Sunni and Shia peoples. This powerful tension is sometimes even more profound than conflicts between Muslims and other faiths. It has increased massively in scope and intensity recently and has been further exacerbated by external interventions. In Pakistan and Malaysia, in Iraq and Syria, in Lebanon and Bahrain, in Yemen and Somalia and Afghanistan, it is becoming a disaster. It is important, therefore, for non-Muslims who are dealing with the Ummah to communicate with both Sunni and Shia voices. To be oblivious to this reality would be like ignoring, over many centuries, that there were differences between Catholics and Protestants, or trying to resolve the civil war in Northern Ireland without engaging both Christian communities. What would have been the consequences if the Protestant-Catholic struggle in Ireland had spread throughout the Christian world, as is happening today between Shia and Sunni Muslims in more than 9 countries? It is of the highest priority that these dangerous trends be well understood and resisted, and that the fundamental legitimacy of pluralistic outlooks be honored in all aspects of our lives together, including matters of faith. Permettez-moi à ce point de mon discours de m'adresser à vous à nouveau en français. Je viens d'évoquer les incompréhensions entre le monde industrialisé et le monde musulman, et les oppositions qui flétrissent indûment les relations entre les grandes traditions de l'islam. Pourtant, le cœur, la raison, et pour ceux qui en sont animés, la foi, nous disent qu'une plus grande harmonie est possible. De fait, des évolutions récentes nous donnent une ouverture. Parmi ces évolutions, je voudrais dire combien la démarche constitutionnaliste est importante pour corriger l'inadéquation de nombreuses constitutions existantes avec l'évolution des sociétés, notamment lorsqu'elles sont en développement. C'est un sujet essentiel que les devoirs de ma charge m'interdisent d'ignorer. Vous serez peut-être surpris d'apprendre que 37 pays du monde ont adopté une nouvelle constitution dans les dernières 10 années et 12 sont en phase avancée de modernisation de la leur, soit un total de 49 pays. Dit autrement, ce mouvement concerne un quart des États membres des Nations Unies. Sur ce total de 49 pays, 25% sont des pays à majorité musulmane. Ceci montre qu'aujourd'hui, la revendication par les sociétés civiles de structures constitutionnelles nouvelles est devenue incontournable. Je voudrais ici m'arrêter un instant pour souligner une difficulté particulière du monde musulman. Là, les partis religieux sont structurellement porteurs du principe de l'inséparabilité de la religion et de la vie de la cité. La conséquence en est que lorsqu'ils négocient les termes d'une constitution avec des interlocuteurs qui revendiquent la séparation entre État et religion, le consensus sur la loi suprême est d'évidence difficile à atteindre. Cependant, un pays vient de nous faire la démonstration que cela est possible. La République tunisienne. Ce n'est pas le lieu de commenter par le menu sa nouvelle constitution. Disons toutefois qu'elle est la résultante d'un débat pluraliste assumé et qu'elle semble contenir les règles nécessaires pour assurer le respect mutuel entre composantes de la société civile. Ceci se traduit en particulier par une appropriation de la notion de coalition, que ce soit au niveau électoral ou gouvernemental. Il s'agit là d'une grande avancée pour l'expression de ce pluralisme accepté que le Canada et l'Imamat Ismaili appellent de leurs vœux. Remarquons enfin une conséquence que cette évolution laisse espérer. Le forum des débats et conflits, inhérent à toute société pluraliste, n'est plus la rue ou la place, mais la cour constitutionnelle d'un État de droit. Outre le génie propre des constitutionnalistes tunisiens, les travaux préparatoires ont été l'occasion de consultations de droit constitutionnel comparés. Je voudrais saluer en particulier le rôle des juristes portugais, citoyens d'un pays pour lequel j'ai beaucoup de considération et qui, comme le Canada, a développé une civilisation du respect mutuel entre communautés et d'ouverture aux religions. Je fais référence ici à la loi à dimension concordataire qui régit les relations entre la République portugaise et l'Imamat Ismaili depuis 2010. Devant votre très honorable Assemblée, je suis heureux d'ajouter que cette loi, votée à l'unanimité, prend acte de la qualité d'entité supranationale de l'Imamat Ismaili. Pour conclure sur la Constitution tunisienne, M. François Hollande, président de la République française, a dit à Tunis: « Ce qui fait l'originalité de votre révolution et même de votre Constitution, c'est le rôle de la société civile. » Clearly, the voices playing a major role in Tunisia were the voices of civil society. By civil society, I mean an array of institutions which operate on a private, voluntary basis, but are motivated by high public purposes. They include institutions devoted to education and culture, science and research, to commercial, labor and ethnic and religious concerns, as well as professional societies in law, accounting, banking, engineering, and medicine. Civil society encompasses groups that work on health and safety and environmental matters, organizations that are engaged in humanitarian service or in the arts of the media. There is sometimes a tendency in the search for progress to focus solely on politics and government or on the private profit-making sector, and surely they both have roles to play. But in my view, the world needs to pay more attention, much, much more attention, to the potential role of civil society. We see it expanding in many places, from sub-Saharan Africa to Tunisia and Egypt, from Iran to Bangladesh. At a time of extreme danger in Kenya a few years ago, the beginnings of a civil war, the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, led the way to a peaceful solution which rested heavily on the strength of Kenya's civil society. Increasingly, I believe the voices of civil society are voices for change, where change has been overdue. They have been voices of hope for people living in fear. They are voices that can help transform countries of crisis into countries of opportunity. There are too many societies where too many people live in a culture of fear, condemned to a life of poverty. Addressing that fear and replacing it with hope will be a major step to the elimination of poverty. And often, the call for hope to replace fear will come from the voices of civil society. An active civil society can open the door for an enormous variety of energies and talents from a broad spectrum of organizations and individuals. It means opening the way for diversity. It means welcoming plurality. I believe that Canada is uniquely able to articulate and exemplify three critical underpinnings of a quality civil society: a commitment to pluralism, to meritocracy, and to a cosmopolitan ethic. A cosmopolitan ethic is one that welcomes the complexity of human society. It balances rights and duties, freedom and responsibility. It is an ethic for all peoples, the familiar and the other, whether they live across the street or across the planet. The Arkhan Development Network has worked over 5 decades to assist in the enhancement of civil society. And as we look to its future, we are honored that Canada views us as a valued partner. Thank you, Prime Minister. One key to Canada's success in building a meritocratic civil society is your recognition that democratic societies require more than democratic governments. I've been impressed by recent studies showing the activity of voluntary institutions and not-for-profit organizations in Canada to be among the highest in the world. This Canadian spirit resonates with a cherished principle in Shia Ismaili culture, the importance of contributing to one's individual energies on a voluntary basis to improving the lives of others. This is not a matter of philanthropy, but rather self-fulfillment, enlightened self-fulfillment. During my Golden Jubilee, and this is important, 6 years ago, Ismailis from around the world volunteered their gifts, not only of wealth, but most notably of time and knowledge in support of our work. We established a time and knowledge framework, a structured process for engaging an immense pool of expertise involving tens of thousands of volunteers. Many of them traveled to the developing countries as part of this outpouring of service. 1/3 of those were Canadians. Their impact has been enormous in helping us to achieve best practice standards in our institutions and programs, making us, we hope, an even better partner for Canada. Such efforts thrive when multiple inputs can be matched to multiple needs, which is why Canada's immense economic diversity is such a valuable global resource. One of the foundation qualities of Canada's civil society is its educational emphasis. Studies show that Canadian students, whether native or foreign-born, perform in the very top tier of students internationally, and indeed that more than 45% of the foreign-born population in Canada has a tertiary degree. This record of educational opportunity resonates strongly with the Shia Ismaili belief in the transformative power of the human intellect, a conviction that underscores AKDN's massive commitment to education wherever we are present, not only education for our faith, but also education for our world. To do this, we are engaged in all levels of education. The Arkhan University in Karachi and East Africa are expanding to create a new liberal arts faculty and to establish 8 new postgraduate schools in collaboration with several Canadian universities. We share with Canada a deep appreciation for the potential of early childhood education. Congratulations, Prime Minister, for your initiative on this. It is the period of the greatest development of the brain. This education is one of the most cost-effective ways to improve the quality of life for rural as well as urban populations. In this regard, let me take a moment to salute the late Dr. Fraser Mustard, whose work in early childhood development will impact millions of people around the world. The AKDN has been fortunate to have been inspired and counseled by this great Canadian scientist and humanist. Quality education is fundamental to the development of a meritocratic civil society, and thus to the development of pluralistic attitudes. The history of Canada has a great deal to teach us in this regard, including the long incremental processes through which quality civil societies and committed cultures of pluralism are built. One of the watchwords of our new Global Center for Pluralism is that pluralism is a process and not a product. I know that many Canadians would describe their own pluralism as a work in progress, but it is also an asset of enormous global quality. So finally, what will a quality civil society require from us? Sadly, the world is becoming more pluralist in fact, but not necessarily in spirit. Cosmopolitan social patterns have not yet been matched by a cosmopolitan ethic. In fact, one harsh reality is that religious hostility and intolerance seems to be on the rise in many places, from the Central African Republic to the South Sudan, to Nigeria, to Myanmar, the Philippines, and other countries, between major religious groups and within them. Again, Canada has responded in notable ways, including the establishment just 1 year ago of the Office of Religious Freedom. Its challenges, like those facing the Center of Global Pluralism, are enormous, and its contributions will be warmly welcomed, and surely it will also serve a worthy model for other countries. In sum, I believe that civil society is one of the most powerful forces in our time, one that will become an increasingly universal influence, engulfing more countries, influencing, reshaping, and sometimes even replacing ineffective regimes. And I also believe that civil society around the world should be vigorously encouraged and wisely nurtured by those who have made it work most successfully. Canada, first amongst all. I'm most grateful to the Prime Minister and to you who have given me this opportunity to share, from a faith perspective, some of the issues that preoccupy me when looking ahead. I hope I have explained why I am convinced about the global validity of our partnership for human development. Let me end with a personal thought. As you build your lives for yourselves and others, you will come to rest upon certain principles. Central to my life has been a verse in the Holy Quran, which addresses itself to the whole of humanity. It says, "O mankind, fear your Lord, who created you of a single soul, and from it created its mate, and from the pair of them scattered abroad many men and women." I know of no more beautiful expression about the unity of our human race, born indeed from a single soul. Thank you.
Your Highness, Monsieur le Premier Ministre, Monsieur le Président Scheer, honorable senators and members of the House of Commons, distinguished guests, mesdames et messieurs. On behalf of all present at this joint session of the Parliament of Canada, I wish to thank Your Highness for your thoughtful address to Parliament this morning. Your Highness, your insight and leadership inspires us all to continue our work of humanitarian intervention throughout the global village. Your words today have underscored for Canadians the importance of humanitarian work as part of our national Canadian vocation as a caring and generous society. The lifelong commitment to the service of humanity exemplified by Your Highness is a beacon to all of us and is greatly admired. During the 2006 inaugural ceremony to establish the delegation of the Ismaili Imamat here in Ottawa, Your Highness said, and I quote, "Even against the most daunting challenges, social and economic progress can and must be a shared experience based on a cosmopolitan ethic and nurtured by a spirit of genuine partnership," end quote. Your Highness, these words convey the essence of our joint efforts. Nous partageons de nombreuses priorités liées à la promotion du progrès social et économique, notamment la santé maternelle et infantile, le microfinancement et l'entreprise du secteur privé, particulièrement en Asie et en Afrique. Nous croyons également que l'éducation joue un rôle essentiel, comme vous avez mentionné ce matin, pour combler les lacunes du monde dans le domaine du savoir, pour préparer les nouvelles générations à connaître du succès et à relever les défis de demain, et pour que le développement économique serve le développement humain. Ours is a natural partnership in this area, based on Canada's reputation as a global leader in education and the long-standing tradition of the Ismaili Imamat in education development. Through collaborative projects involving several Canadian universities, we are undertaking important work to strengthen jointly the quality of teaching and learning, particularly in such areas as health and medicine, business, and the humanities. Nous travaillons aussi ensemble pour exploiter le potentiel des ordinateurs de la haute technologie en classe et pour renforcer l'enseignement primaire, particulièrement pour les filles. Les efforts constants que vous déployez pour promouvoir l'éducation dans les pays en développement suscitent l'admiration. Les Canadiens s'inspirent de l'engagement indéfectible dont vous faites preuve pour combler ces besoins en matière de développement international, même lorsque vous êtes confrontés à d'énormes défis. Your Highness, Prime Minister, the esteem in which we regard His Highness's commitment, not only to educational development, but to global progress, more generally is reflected in the unanimous adoption of a motion in both houses of our Parliament in June of 2009 to bestow honorary Canadian citizenship on His Highness. Just permit me to share another of His Highness's visionary statements drawn from his address in 2009 at a graduating class of the University of Alberta, and I quote, "In today's community of nations, a country's standing is no longer recognized simply by what it can achieve for itself, but just as much by what it can do for others," end quote. These words, honorable colleagues, the words are a powerful idea emanating from one of the rare, true global, and most highly respected statesmen of our time. They set a high standard that we strive to achieve. And so, on behalf of the honourable members of the House of Commons and the Senate of Canada, we thank Your Highness for your visit, for your inspiring message this morning, and for your continuing efforts to make this world of ours a better place.
Your Highness, Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker of the Senate, honorable senators and members of the House of Commons, right honorable friends, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of all members of the House of Commons, it is a personal honor to be able to add my thanks for your presence here today and for your kind and inspirational words, Your Highness. During the nearly 57 years in which you have been Imam, much has changed around the world and for Ismailis. One constant throughout, however, has been your unwavering dedication to improving the lives of the world's most vulnerable. Your leadership in these bold initiatives has garnered support from countries, organizations, and agencies the world over, and Canada, and indeed Canadians from across our country, are proud to count themselves among your most ardent supporters. Qualité importante aux yeux des parlementaires, vous avez aussi pris l'initiative de souligner les rôles clés que joue le dialogue et le respect de la diversité dans la consolidation de la démocratie partout dans le monde. Cette perspective, la vôtre, a éduqué de nombreuses personnes au Canada et ailleurs, pays où vos agences travaillent depuis de nombreuses années, main dans la main avec le gouvernement du Canada. As we all know, an important element of true dialogue is respect for different positions and for diversity. Fundamentally, it is about respecting and honoring the dignity of all people. In this, you are and have always been a clear beacon and an example to follow. Your unabating tolerance and hope in the face of challenging circumstances and seemingly insurmountable odds is an inspiration for us all. L'engagement à ces idées que vous et le gouvernement du Canada partagez s'est traduit par la fondation, ici même à Ottawa, du Centre mondial du pluralisme. Comme tous les autres projets dans lesquels vous vous êtes investi jusqu'à maintenant, ce centre met l'accent sur la recherche, l'éducation et le dialogue avec des partenaires d'ici et d'ailleurs. Through your knowledge, your vision, your commitment, and your dedication, you are changing the world and making it a better place for those who are most in need of our assistance. Au nom de tous les députés, je vous remercie encore une fois pour tout ce que vous avez fait et pour tout ce que vous ferez. Merci, thank you.
His Highness and the Prime Minister are signing a protocol of understanding that will enhance our strategic partnership in a number of areas: the promotion of human rights and socio-economic development, the promotion of trade and economic objectives, and enhanced cooperation in promoting peace abroad and in the fight to reduce poverty in select countries and regions.